I'm now going to go back to my normal login rather than the new one I just created, because there was a glitch which didn't allow me to save the company. So I'm now going in as a buyer. So once you've registered or logged in, the screen should open up on the dashboard, and obviously the dashboard is the shop window, and it's the critical piece where, as you can see, there's still plenty of work to be done. This will enable the buyer to navigate across all the screens and carry out all the functions. So everything will come back to this sort of central screen. What it needs to look like, or the functionality it needs to have, is what I've detailed in the spreadsheet. So this is the kind of functionality it needs to have. So it's obviously got details of the person that's registered, and they can click in to see their profile details. There's the company profile details, and it's here on the right hand side, which are all the sort of key functional details. So the first one is projects. So when a buyer wants to add a project, it can click to add a project. It can go into the live projects that are already posted, and it can also look at historical projects. Then you've got the requests, so that's about the projects. You've then got the requests, so when it wants to call off a supply against one of these already loaded up projects, you've got click add request to review live requests and to also look at historical requests. And then finally you've got the responses. So against these requests that have been posted up, it can look at all of the different responses and the status of those responses. So there's a summary screen for that. There is then, of course, other information to motivate use of the platform. So sort of front and center is the earnings that have been received by the buyer. So these are the additional earnings on top of the market price negotiation that he would do under normal circumstances. So what's he earned this month, what did he earn last month, and what is it year to date? And you can look at the accrues of savings for the month, for last month, and these are as yet unpaid but accrued. And then to claim, so another functionality is to claim a rebate earning. He can enter the screen through here. It's also got details of the savings by project. So basically he will navigate to each of the screens that I'm going to show you, going back into the platform from this dashboard, which obviously replaces here. First thing that a buyer would do when he's registered on the platform is to load up a project. Now that's not necessarily intuitive, so we'll have to have a way of prompting, a tutorial or something. But to find how to load up a project, you hit the Projects tab at the top, and it's Create a New Project. You can see I've already got some loaded in, but it's basically Create a New Project. Again, all of the input data fields are pretty straightforward. So what's the project name? Approximate value. The buyer's username and company are already registered. When is the project going to commence? Which is a drop-down box. So it allows you to put in the date that the project starts. If it's already started, put today's date. And what is the project duration? What is the approximate duration of the project in months? In months needs to be specified there, so it's likely to be at least 2 years. What kind of project it is, whether it's a residential or commercial or an infrastructure project, and what is the sort of size of the project. So in residential it's split by building size, commercial it's more by floor area, and infrastructure it's asking you to select the type of project that it is. So we'll go with residential here, and then it's putting in the address details of the project. I won't show you all of those, and then you save the project. Once you save the project, you can see that it appears back in that list of projects. So this is the last one that I put in, and you've got the ability then to be able to update those if there's any mistakes. And I just noticed there that I put a different character in rather than a number in approximate project value, so I can change that. We should actually protect these fields so that they don't allow the wrong type of input. You then save again to go back to the list of projects. So this is a list of all the projects of the particular buyer contractor. Once a project has been put in, the details are in the system, so anytime there is a requirement to purchase against any of the projects, the data doesn't have to be put back in again. The logical next step for a buyer is then to put in a request for materials. And you can see a list of requests, historical requests that have already been put in. When a buyer wants to post up a request, again it's very simple, create new request, taking them into a new screen. Again, all of the input data to post up a request is very straightforward and logical. There's a field to put a request name, so this is the kind of thing that they would do when they send out a request if they did it by email, for example. They then select the type of material they want, so we've got an initial list, but obviously this is not an exhausting list, and let's say that it was for steel rebar. You just select the sort of major product grouping. Again, your details as a buyer are already in your company and your buyer ID. You then select the project for all the projects that are already loaded in. The last one we loaded in was this one. You select the project. You select the approximate request value. This is in rupees. That needs to be specified. And there is an option then if you want to put in a specific specification for the material that you're requesting. You can upload a file in the same way that we did with the company logo. So you choose a file. Once you've selected it from your internal files, you upload. Then you select the request open date. It defaults to today's date, again as a drop-down box, and you select the close date. So let's say that when you posted your request you wanted answers back within a week, then obviously you can set that up. And you would also then specify when you would expect delivery to be made as information for the supplier so that they can make an informed decision. There are then a number of optional fields. The purpose of these optional fields is to sort of pre-qualify the capability and caliber of the supplier. So minimum turnover, you might specify a minimum turnover to make sure that you only had the big suppliers. So by checking the box, you then, or you should be forced to input the data in here. If you don't check the box, you won't. So the form will not allow you to save if you've checked that box unless you've put a value in here. Other examples are references required, are trade associations required, and again they're free form boxes. So once you've checked the box that association required, what is the relevant association is a free form input box. Now there is a facility to select the supplier, so it needs to be linked to the request type. But if you've got a preferred supplier as a buyer, you can select your preferred supplier and check off more than one to make sure that, and this is still to be developed a little bit further, but make sure that they are informed by email as soon as you post up the request. Then at the bottom of the form, you actually add the request detail by clicking on Add Request Description. Now there is something that we need to address, which if you want to put in more than one line, you actually have to specify that before you start. So you can add a line, but the best thing would be for that to be able to happen after you've done each line rather than do that at the beginning. You've then got a more accurate description of the product itself, how much you want, and the units. when you're done, save. And that will take you back to your list of requests. Now, as with the project screen, your list of requests also has the facility to update or edit any request that's already posted. The next thing a buyer will want to do was to be able to view the responses to the requests that have already been posted. Now, ideally, there will be on the dashboard there'll be prompts to say that responses have been received and from whom, and a list of those responses, and they can access the responses screen directly from the dashboard. But from this screen, you can view responses to any individual request by clicking on the View button here. Now, the way that it's been done, the way that Jatin's done it, so you're actually accessing the responses directly from the request screen, which makes this tab responses up here superfluous. So that we need to get rid of that. But to go into the detail of the responses to a request, click on View. This is then a list of all the responses to a singular request. It's in a list format so that you can very quickly review the names of the company in this second column here, and you can quickly decide that if you've got too many responses based on the name of the company, you may choose to reject some of those straight away. So there is the facility to basically select one of three statuses: directly reject, negotiate, or accept. Now, it's unlikely that they're going to put negotiate or accept until they've actually reviewed the detail of the response. Now, there are actually two types of detail that the buyer can review. The first is the response, which will include all of the pricing details, and the second is what is the platform offer, the rebate offer, so what is the additional savings that are being offered on top of what would be normal market price. So we'll start by looking at the response detail itself. Now, this screen will show the buyer the details of the request. So this is a previous one that I've done. So in this case, it's formwork, and this is the supplier, and there are various details about the rebate offer, which we need to have a look at in terms of these fields here. But it will show when was the response created in terms of when did the supplier respond, what's the response valid from date and valid to date, whether it's been modified, and then there is the status. So we saw those three statuses: reject, negotiate, or decline. In this case, because I've done it previously, this is the decline one. And in terms of the responder on the supplier side, what is the authority of that responder? It also shows then the pricing details. So you've got the product description, you've got the volume that's required, and then you've got the unit price, and it specifies what the unit is. So that's obviously only one element of the response, and obviously a key one because it's got the pricing detail. But if you then go back and look at the platform offer, you're able to understand the detail of the platform offer itself. So this is some of the detail that appeared on the other screen, but it's basically detailing what are the various thresholds for when the rebate percentages kick in for the platform offer. So in this case, the way that the rebate is structured, as the buyer would understand it, we need to look at ways of displaying this in a much more easy format. But it's basically saying that for the first sale through the platform, it's so that there is no threshold in this case. It's ready to offer a 5% rebate. If sales through the platform cross a threshold of, in this case, 10,000 rupees, then that rebate will increase to 7%. When it crosses 20,000, it will increase to 9%. When it crosses 500,000, it will increase to 10%, etc. And it's also showing that the rebate is in this case a 1-year rebate, which was set from the 17th of April 2018, and actually, so the minimum would be 1 month. I think this is because it's gone past the date. A rebate, and we'll cover that when we look at the supplier journey, but a rebate has to be active and valid for a minimum of 1 month, and it could be done on a quarterly basis, or it could be done on a yearly basis. So then if you go back, what the buyer will need to do is to be able to understand what is the response from each supplier, and to be able to compare the rebates from the different suppliers, compare the pricing from each, and a combination of the two. So this is meant to be the combination of the two, which will allow the buyer to make an informed decision as to what the cost savings are. Again, this is still to be refined, but it will show all of the different suppliers and what is their offer in terms of rebate and in terms of price, and the overall cost to the buyer, to enable him to make an informed comparison and a buying decision. Whenever the buyer clicks on one of these status buttons, whether it's reject, negotiate or accept, a message is sent automatically by email to the relevant supplier, so that he knows that the buyer wants to negotiate, or he knows that his offer, as he last detailed it, has been accepted or rejected. The next stage of the journey for the buyer is to claim the rebates once supply has taken place. So again, there is a screen to create a rebate claim. The idea is that the buyer will make the claim once he's received the supply, he's satisfied with the supply, and he's paid for it by clicking on the Create New Claim. And again, it's very simple set of data, so it is selecting the response for what material it was. The supplier will automatically populate. He will then need to select the invoice date, enter manually the invoice number and the invoice amount, and save. Now, once he's lodged that claim, this will appear in this summary screen here, and then what he's waiting for is that the supplier is going to confirm through true or false whether payment has been received, and that is the critical prompt for the platform to invoice the supplier for the rebate amount. Now, the rebate amount will include the claim of this buyer, the one that I'm logged in on, but possibly many others. We will, as a platform, we will accumulate all of the rebate claims against that supplier and submit a monthly invoice. Now again, there is a facility to revise, edit and update, and of course once the claim has been paid, it can be closed off. Now it will remain an open claim until the buyer has received its share of the rebate claim that was invoiced by the platform to the supplier. Now the key to the usability of the platform is the dashboard, because firstly it should prompt what the buyer needs to do. So what are the various steps, what's the logical steps to post up a project in the first place, and then against that project to post up requests for the needs as and when they come, to be able to review the responses, to be able to compare the cost benefit of each of the responses, and select, and then once supply has taken place, to be able to reclaim the rebate that's due. So the dashboard is the sort of critical missing piece. Now there are some other functionalities. So what we did want to, and again you'll get the clues of this when you look at the spreadsheet that I previously sent, which shows what are the sort of key features that I would like on the dashboard. But meeting schedules, for example, the idea here is that when the buyer has received a response from a supplier that it's interested in, it wants to negotiate, it was basically able to schedule an online video meeting just by having its own meeting place, virtual meeting place, and inviting the supplier with a timing which will automatically send a text message or a WhatsApp message and an email